thanks again for coming to our Understanding Modular Assessments, grades 3 through 5 for Math, ELA, and Science. We appreciate you coming today. Just some general logistics for this webinar. First and foremost, we want to thank the Department of Education. They are the reason why we are able to put these webinars on. And without that, we wouldn't be able to do it. So we appreciate the folks there. Also, everybody is muted. We can't hear you. If you have a dog barking in the background, if you have kids around you or what have you, we can't hear you. So also know that if you have questions, we want to make sure that you are putting them in the Q&A portion of your screen for Zoom. If you put something in the chat, it will show up for everybody. So just know it will be showing up for all people to see. The questions we typically have you put in the Q&A, and then we have Annie here that will be feeding me some of the questions, and we end up seeing them. We check the Q&A a little bit more. Also, big question of the day, you will get an email tomorrow that will have a link to the slides for this webinar. It will have your PD certificate, which is a lot of what people want to make sure that they're getting as well. It will have information about where this video recording of this webinar will be, and then some of the other documents that we have that we reference for this webinar and in the slides. Also, at the end, when you log off of Zoom, there'll be a brief survey. We really appreciate your feedback. We're always looking to make changes that are for the good and positive. We want to know what we're doing well and what you would like us to do a little bit better. So please take a moment. I think it's 4, maybe 5 questions. It's very much appreciated. So here we are. I am Heather Jenkins. We also have here Annie Wallace from the New Hampshire Department of Education.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.
She's your math person. We also, hot off the presses, have Kate here that is your new ELA person. So she's also on this particular webinar.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate coming and devoting your time to this. Thank you.
So here's our gentle reminder. The whole purpose of what we're talking about when we're doing any sort of assessments with students is to make sure that we're looking at improving student performances, not just auditing it. So we don't want to assess just for the sake of assessing. We want to make sure that what we are assessing, we are actually using to help us inform our instruction. The New Hampshire Sas modular assessments are one way to do that. So we want to talk a lot about that today. And so we'll just get started with that. I'm going to turn off my video because it is a little bit distracting. It will also, as we turn off our videos, maybe make your screen a little bit bigger and you won't see our pictures in the sides. So we'll all turn off our videos here and we will get started. So our goals for today are to answer the following questions here. Why use the New Hampshire Sas modular assessments? What are the options for the modular assessments? How do they help you better understand your grade level standards, and how do you get to them? So first things first, I want to talk really, this is our agenda for the day, or for this hour-long presentation. I really want to talk to you first and foremost about the benefits and how you can use the modulars. Then we'll get into some of the options for your grade levels, the examples. We'll talk about the assessment viewing application and how to administer the modulars and the reporting. And then there are a lot of other New Hampshire Sas resources, and we've highlighted a few of them within this presentation. So we'll talk about that. Just a reminder, anytime you have a question, go ahead and ask the question in that Q&A. One thing also that you should know is that you do have the option to raise your hand, but it's really difficult in the webinar format to be able to have you raise your hand. So if you could try your best to put your questions in the Q&A, we will answer them as best we can. So some of the benefits of the modular assessments. First and foremost, they're pretty short and they're periodic assessments. The New Hampshire Sas summatives are the really long ones. They have to do with all different areas of ELA and math. These particular modular assessments are shorter. the ELA ones are still a little bit longer because you've got a passage or passages that you're answering multiple questions on. But in general, they are shorter than the New Hampshire SAS summatives. The great thing about the modular assessments is that all students get the same questions. So you can start looking at where students are doing really well and where students are not necessarily understanding the information. The ELA and math questions are based on the Common Core, and the science questions and modulars are based on NGSS. The modular assessments are also based on those standard domains, so you can match them up with current units. So if you're doing a unit on numbers and operations base 10, you can do a modular that has to do with numbers and operations base 10. And also you can administer them at any time throughout the year. Right now, Cambium, who is the company that does the New Hampshire SAS portal, they are starting to upload the students into Tide. So pretty shortly, you'll be able to be administering these assessments. We always kind of use a rule of thumb. Usually it's about early October where you're able to start administering. And the assessments, for the most part, you would administer at your current grade level, but if you find that you have a student or students that are not able to access your current grade level, you're able to administer assessments at a grade level below your current grade level for grades 3 through 5. For the first time, the modular assessments will now be available also for grades 1 and 2. There's a few at each one of those grade levels, so you can go down into the little bit lower grades as well. So how they help you as teachers. They help you measure student achievement. How are students doing? The great news about these is that they're automatically scored. The students take the assessment, they're scored, and the results are almost immediate, and again, down to that question level. They can also help you evaluate your program and your teaching impact. A lot of times we are following a program, or we look at our teaching and we say, okay, let's look at these modular assessment results and let's see, how are we doing with teaching? What do we need to add? How do we maybe show this differently to make an impact on student achievement? They can also help you understand where a child's gaps or their progress or their needs are. And they can help you determine resource needs, not just resources as in I need to teach this in a different way myself, or I need to find another, example of how to do this, but also the resources of people that you have in your building. So if you have people who are able to take kids and give them a little bit of extra help, a lot of times you can use the results from these to say, these are the things that we can work on with these students. It's just another point of data for you to be able to use to figure that out. And then they're obviously going to provide you detailed information for instructional purposes. The biggest benefit I've seen of teachers using the modular assessments is really helping them understand and gain a deeper understanding of those Common Core standards, and really the depth of knowledge that students need to have to be successful with those particular skills. As you look at the modular assessments and you look at the results from that, you start to dig down into the question level and you can see the standards that they're matched up with, and really start to understand maybe where you might be missing a little bit of the standard, or where there might be a misunderstanding of what that standard was supposed to cover. For students, the benefits are, it's basically giving them an understanding of what the assessments are all about. We tend to, if we're not using modular assessments, the only time the students see the New Hampshire SAS portal and the system is when they take the summatives. It is a very stressful time of year. We're trying to cram in as much information as we can. We're asking them to do things in a way that they're not necessarily used to within their daily school life. And then we wonder why they're not necessarily able to show what they know. So these modular assessments will give them a little bit of an understanding of that. because they would be using it more than just that one time a year. It also allows them to practice a little bit. The modulars start to get away some of those barriers of testing. So if you have a math question that works with a graph that students weren't necessarily understanding how to interact with, or a number line, or they see that they have to, on an ELA question, they have to do a multi-select instead of a single select for multiple choice, it just allows them to navigate, here are the passages, here are the questions, and they get to really practice and take some of those barriers out. This is just an example of teachers who have been using the modular assessments aren't new, with the exception of the first and second grade ones this year and some high school ones that are added this year. For grades 3 through 8, they've been there for a number of years. And as teachers use the modular assessments and start understanding really what those standards are about, the proficiency improves for their students as well, not just on the modulars, but on the New Hampshire SAS. The different ways the modulars can be used is you can use them as an end of unit assessment. If you already have end of unit assessments that you have to do for your specific programs or in your schools, you can also use them as a pre-assessment for a unit. You can set them up as a formative assessment and say, okay, I've covered a lot of this information. Let's just see where students are at and what I need to make sure that I'm really hitting home for the next couple of weeks. Or it can be used as a practice test for the summatives as well. Just because students take it and it's scored does not mean that it necessarily has to be used in a way that is really for any sort of formative use, although we would highly recommend using it for that. This last one I really like, and that is using those individual questions as a question of the day for math or for ELA or even for writing, to say, here's what we would have as a prompt. Here's the information that we would, for the passages. You're going to read the passages. What would you do here? For math, you can put up a specific modular question, and you can use that as your example question and have kids walk through it and talk about the strategies that they would use to be able to solve it. You do this by looking at the assessment viewing application and opening up a modular and being able to project those particular questions. And I'll show you how to do that as well. I just want to pause here for just a second and make sure that we don't have any questions.
I have nothing yet, either in the chat or the question and answer.
Okay, perfect. So then we will move on to the next section here. So we're going to talk about the options that we have right now for the different modular assessments for grades 3 through 5. And so we'll get started on that. When we look at the options we have for reading, these are the areas that you have that we're looking at for reading. So you have editing, reading informational text, listening, and reading literature. For writing, there are informative and opinion writing options for grades 3 through 5. For math, there's measurement, data, and geometry. So those are 2 domains of math in one. Then you have numbers and operations base 10, numbers and operations fractions, and then operations and algebraic thinking. For science, you'll have all of these science topics here: earth systems, weather, ecosystems, inheritance, forces and energy, structure properties, and waves. We'll talk a little bit about the science. I know that the science modulars are really located in grade 5, but I do want to sort of shout out to the grades 3 and 4 teachers. Your students in grades 3 and 4 also have access to take the 5th grade modulars. They are actually on topic areas that have to do with your particular grade levels. So we'll go through that in just a little bit. For math, for grade 3, these are your options here. And so you have this measurement, data, and geometry. You have a couple of options for modulars there. Numbers and operations base 10, you have a couple of different options. Numbers and operations, fractions, you have 3 options, and then you have operations and algebraic thinking, 4 options for those. Same thing here. As we have in your materials that you'll be getting, each grade level, we have created a modular assessment example document. It's about 20 to 25 pages long. All of this information is pulled from those. So you can either look at the slides here or you'll be able to look at those particular documents. But I just want to explain a little bit about what this means. So for grade 3 for math, these are your different options for your modulars. Here are how many modular assessments you have for each one. So that operation is an algebraic thinking. You had 4 different modulars to choose from. This MC has to do with the number of questions that are multiple choice and the number of questions that are open questions. A lot of times when we're thinking of which modular we might want to use, maybe we don't want to use one with a whole bunch of multiple choice questions. So we would use a different modular, knowing that modular D is a lot of multiple choice. So you can use this as just one of the indicators or one of the ways to look at what the modular questions are asking. You can also go through the assessment viewing application and also take a peek at what the questions are, but this is just a quick look at the breakdown of the types of questions. Also with the breakdown, we have everything matched up for math to a specific standard. And so for these operations and algebraic thinking, for this OA1 for 3rd grade, we have for the first modular, there's 1 question on that standard. There's 2 questions on OA9. So this is just the total number of questions that they have pertaining to each standard. Again, it's just another indicator. If you're looking at a specific standard and you really want to hit home a specific standard, you could choose a modular that might have more questions on that standard. When it comes to these colors here for math, we have matched this up with the Achieve the Core and what the Common Core standards are that are deemed to be a major standard in a specific grade level, a supporting standard, and an additional, and they're color coded here.
Heather, I just want to chime in looking at major, supporting, and additional, it's important to remember that that is following the algebra progression. So if it's labeled as an additional standard, it's not that it's not important, it's just not a critical one in the developing the algebra progression. Okay.
Yes, exactly. All right. So the last thing that we have is this, there are supplemental documents. I'm going to thank Annie right now, give her a shout out. For every grade level, what Annie has done is she's gone through the modular assessments for math, and she has mapped them and said, basically, for measurement, data, and geometry, for the first modular, question 1, here's the standard associated, the focus area. And this is where I feel like it's a game changer as well, is that it has a common misunderstanding or area of challenge for students, and then just some notes of what they're doing on this particular question on the modular. For those of you who are teaching specific skills, I really feel like this focus area is going to help you. So if you're looking at you're teaching bar graphs, you would know that this particular modular question 4, you could go into the assessment viewing application and you could pull up that question and use that as a question of the day. So this is one of the supplemental documents that we have that you'll get access to tomorrow. So for 4th grade, we have the same type of breakdown. So here are your options for the modular assessments for math in 4th grade. Here is that same question breakdown for 4th grade. And again, with the mapping to the Achieve the Core algebra progression. And then here's just a snapshot of what you would see in one of those supplemental documents that Annie has created for math. And I just wanted to make sure grade 5, you got the same information here. Your question breakdown. Here's your Achieve the Core breakdown. And then just a quick screenshot of what your supplemental document will look like as well. When it comes to ELA, I have the same thing sort of coming up here. So these are the grade 3 options for ELA. So you can see that you've got a couple of editing, you've got a couple of, so just so you know, informative is writing, informational is reading. If you were in the assessment viewing application, you would see that right away. You would open up the informative and you would see that it's writing and that the informational would give you passages and that it would be a lot of questions associated with it. When you are administering, it's just, you just want to make sure that you're choosing the right one, because if you're trying to give a modular on reading informational text and you choose an informative one, kids are going to get a writing prompt. So that's just the only confusion that I see mostly with ELA there. The opinion is opinion writing. And then you have this literature, A and B is reading literature, and then you have one of the speaking and listening options. The same breakdown is done here where we have the multiple choice options and the open, how many multiple choice and open questions there are. And then here's where the standards are attached to each one. Achieve the Core doesn't do the same thing for the ELA and reading. I feel like for the most part, your ELA standards, there's no major supporting or additional standards. They're all sort of intertwined and have equal values. So there's nothing from Achieve the Core like that. For 4th grade, this is the same thing. Here are your options for 4th grade. Your number of multiple choice and open questions. And then there's your breakdown for the standards that are attached and how many questions there are for those particular standards. 5th, same here. Question breakdown, question breakdown. Now, when we're talking about science topics, these particular modular assessments are in the 5th grade drop down for the assessment viewing application, and they're also in the 5th grade administration when you do test administration. All of your 3rd and 4th grade students have the ability to take the 5th grade science. It's really important that you start to look at some of these science topics, because they are, if you click on them, I'll show you what in an example of one of these will be. But if you're looking at these, the information here, this is a 5-ESS 2-2. So that is a 5th grade science topic. This one's a 5th grade science topic. So these are all the 5th grade science topics here. But the other ones that we have here, this 4- is your 4th grade science. 3- is 3rd grade science. So anytime you're looking at this, you would be able to match it up in a 3rd or 4th grade science class for them to be able to do a science modular. They are, they're hard. So the earlier you can get students really starting to look at it, they're more of a performance task type of assessment. They're actually called an interim, even though it's not a full interim assessment like we took 2 years ago for ELA and math. But I highly recommend those teachers in grades 3 and 4 taking a peek at these and at least giving your students a sort of snapshot or an understanding of what these particular assessments are about. Any questions before we move on from that?
Sorry, Heather, I forgot to unmute.
I figured.
Confusion about the number of modulars for the 5th grade ELA, that there are more than 2 of them.
More than 2 modulars?
Yes, for the 5th grade ELA.
Yes, so for 5th grade ELA, these are all the modulars. There's, for editing, there's 1 or 2 of them. For informative writing, there's 2 of them. There's more than 2 modulars. It's just for each sort of category, there's a couple of modulars. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so when we're looking at grade level examples, I thought it would be really helpful for folks to see what some of the modular questions look like. These are not exact replicas of what the modular assessments are. They are copywritten, so some of the questions have been changed, or some of these are part of the practice test. But what Annie and I did a couple of years back is when we started looking really and diving into the modulars, we started picking out questions at grade levels in each domain of math that we felt like were really difficult, or that there might be a misconception or a misunderstanding of what students need to know for a particular type of question or a particular standard. This here is just a snippet, one from each grade level for math, and then I have some screenshots for ELA and for science as well. Your individual modular example documents for 3rd grade, for every domain, there will be a standard, a misconception, and a screenshot of what that particular modular question looks like. It's just not represented in these slides here just due to time. But I just wanted to give you a snapshot of a couple of things. So for 3rd grade, this is an example of a modular question. And we're looking at the standard, which is a number and operations base 10 standard. It says a standard right there, and it gives you what the misconception is. Also, when it comes to math, those documents that Annie created, it will have this for every single question for that Excel spreadsheet. For the modular example document PDFs, it will have the biggest misconception that we feel like is for each particular domain. So this is just for grade 3. We feel like this is a question that kids get tripped up on quite a bit. For grade 4, this is one of the questions that we feel like it's operations and algebraic thinking, the common misconception that students have about understanding factors. And for 5th grade, hands down, this is for math. One of the questions that I show almost everybody when it comes to math. This particular standard for numbers and operations fractions in grade 5, I show teachers this particular question, and most often immediately people say, oh my gosh, I don't really teach this. You don't necessarily teach it with mixed fractions, or mixed numbers. And so this is something that we find across the board is a misconception and becomes pretty difficult for students to be able to decipher. For ELA, what we have here is for each type of ELA modular, I have an example of what you might see. The grade level is located on the bottom, so you can just, for your own reference, know what grade level that we pulled this from. So this is a reading literature example. You can see on the left that there's a passage. You can see on the right that there's questions and maybe more than one part. This is that multi-select, select 2 sentences that deal with this particular question, and students navigate across the top here to answer questions. Couple of things that we notice. This says passage 1. That does not mean this is the, necessarily always the only passage. Make sure kids are scrolling down. And that as they click to question 8, what will happen is they'll hit next and another passage will come up with additional questions. So those are just some things that are hard to navigate. And then some of the information up at the top here might help you in your instruction for knowing what things become really important on the ELA modulars. This is a reading informational text example from grade 4, same type of thing. You can see now that I might be on the second set of questions because it's starting with question 8. This is, they basically have to highlight the detail that is pertinent to this particular passage and supports a specific idea from the passage. And again, some general information up at the top. All of these will be in your modular example documents. Here's an editing example from grade 3. What happens is this, if they clicked on this here, it will bring a drop-down menu and they'd have to click on a word or phrase that would be correct in that particular instance. And then speaking and listening, this is just basically they listen to something and they answer a set of questions that has to do with whatever that particular conversation or that particular recording had to say. This is writing. So writing tends to have multiple passages on the left-hand side and then some general instructions about what they need to do and how they need to answer questions on the right-hand side. One thing that I'm just going to put out there, when it comes to writing for modular assessments, and even for the New Hampshire SAS summative for that matter, one thing that we as teachers end up doing is in our classroom, every day students write in a particular way, most of the time on paper, most of the time we're editing, we're doing all of those things. But then when it comes to modular assessments and New Hampshire SAS summatives, we forget that that's what students normally do, and we have them type directly on the computer. But I would highly recommend, if you are doing a writing modular or even the New Hampshire SAS writing, that you give students paper to be able to write on. Obviously, you're not editing it with them or anything, but it's just like math. You wouldn't have them do math without a piece of scrap paper. Give them paper for the writing modular, let them work on their thoughts, let them get everything down, and then they can type it in the computer. It tends to be a little bit more successful that way. So there's the example for writing informative, and here's an example for opinion writing. For science, here's a science example. This is actually one of the test, sort of prep items for science. This is 5th grade science. So basically the students get this information here and they're given a task. And then this is most of the science modulars, all of the science modulars are really more of a performance task type of scenario. So they have this information on the left. This is, they're going to read this and look at this. They're going to use what they know of a particular topic that they've learned in your class. Not everything is going to be here. They're going to have to pull from information that you've taught them. And then they're going to be asked to do sometimes an experiment. Sometimes they're asking specific questions. Sometimes they are asked to conduct all different types of experiments or do some general information here on the right-hand side. So all of these parts of these questions have to do with what they read and what they know for prior knowledge for this particular science topic. Any questions about the examples or what you're going to be seeing on the modulars?
I have nothing at this time in the question and answer or the chat.
Thanks. Okay, let's talk about the assessment viewing application. So to get to the assessment viewing application, here is the link to the New Hampshire SAS portal. I'll tell you, the fastest way to get there is you type in NHSAS, and it's one of the first things that comes up, and then you can get right into that portal. This is what it looks like. As you are on this page, you are going to choose test administration. I use the test administration up at the top. There is also on this page another little area that's the picture. this is where Annie goes into test administration. So there's just a couple different ways you can get into the test administration page. And it will come up with a whole bunch of boxes. This preparing for test up at the top is where the assessment viewing application is. So it's right here on the left-hand side. I'm going to give you a little hint. We don't have it here on the slides, but over here on the right-hand side, this test administration certification, just so you know, if you have not taken your test administration certification this school year, which means basically anytime in late August to September, you will need to take this test administration certification before you get access to the assessment viewing application. You have to take this certification every school year. And so this is a new school year. So even though last year you did it, you'll need to do it again this year before you can get into the assessment viewing application. As we get into the assessment viewing application, you have to log in. Again, here on the bottom, I say, please take the test certification course before you log in. If it's your first time, you'll hit this request a new one for this school year. They'll start to give you all your codes and everything like that. If it doesn't pop up in your email within a minute or so, check your spam. It might be in your spam, and sometimes a code gets sent to that. And so that's the way you're going to be able to get in. You'll enter that code. Once you're in the assessment viewing application and you've logged in, it will give you this drop down and you're able to select a grade. Right now, the assessment viewing application only shows grade 3, 4, 5, through 8 and 11. As we get a little bit further ahead, they are going to have grades 1, 2, 3, and it's going to be, there'll be high school in this drop down list. They're not quite there yet, but they're coming within the next couple of weeks, hopefully. So as you select a grade, this is grade 4, it will pop up with all of the modular assessments that are available for that. So if I had a bigger screener, I could scroll down, you would see the ELA modulars and the math modulars. Again, for grade 4, if you want to see science, you have to choose grade 5, scroll down to the bottom and look at the grade 4 science topics that are going to be there. All right, so moving on here to the administering and reporting. We're going to be talking about how you administer the assessments. So again, you're going to go to the same portal. We're going to go to that test administration again, and down towards the bottom, if you scroll down, there's this administering tests, and you click on that. You will be asked to log in again. If you haven't taken the test certification course, you won't be able to log in. Once you've logged in, if you've ever administered a New Hampshire Sas summative, this should look pretty familiar to you. So the next thing that you're going to do is choose the type of test administration that you would like to do. And then you're able to create that assessment test window. So here we go. I want to go in here because it's a little bit easier than looking at it on slides. So once I'm in, you're at this window. An active test session is probably what most of you are used to when you give the New Hampshire Sas summative assessments. You go over here, you start a new session. You won't have to do this. I just have to do this because I'm an administrator. But what ends up happening when you say start a new session is you're able to pick whichever subject area you would like. So if I chose ELA, we're looking at modulars. The biggest thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that you want to hit the plus symbol until there aren't any more. So you're going to hit plus. If I were to just choose a grade level without choosing the plus, every single modular will show up for that grade level and students won't know which one they're supposed to be doing. So you can just clear that. You hit the plus until there aren't any more. If I wanted to do an opinion writing, I could choose that. A test reason. This test reason is pretty important. You can leave it as unassigned. You do have to pick one. But what happens is, depending on what your test reason is, the students that have all the same test reason will show up in the same section of the reporting portal. So where this becomes important is, if I am a third grade teacher and my whole team is doing a third grade opinion writing modular, we all want to choose the same test reason so that the information and the results show up in the same area and we can look at them all compared to one another. If I choose pre-test, somebody else chooses unassigned, and somebody else chooses winter, there will be 3 separate areas where that report will show up, and we won't be able to see all the students together unless we download it to Excel and put them all in the same place. They end up showing up on separate lines. So you want to just choose the same test reason as your colleagues if you are all doing that. And then what this does is this starts a live session, and you get this session ID, and that's where the students log in, just like they do for the summative. They need their first name and they need their SSID, and they're able to log in, and then they can take this particular modular. You give them this information, and then as soon as students start logging in, you'll start approving the students and getting them into the session, and they can answer the questions. That there is a live session. You stop it, and it basically says, "Are you sure?" And you say yes, and you can stop this session. And now that particular session ID can no longer be used, and students are done for this particular test period. If you needed to go over more than one day and you created a live session, you would just next day do that, start the session, choose the same modular, and students will be able to pick up where they left off.
Heather,
Yeah.
we did have a question on that, and I was not sure. So I thought once they submitted a test, they could not go back to the question, or if enough time had passed.
So if it's 20 minutes, if you pause the test, I believe it's 20 minutes. If it's paused for more than 20 minutes, it will automatically stop the session for them. And then what would happen is, let's say I'm taking a math assessment and I'm on question 6. When that test session ends, the only thing that will happen is the next time I go into that, I will not be able to go to questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I will start with question 7.
Okay, thank you.
The writing should show whatever writing that they have put in there. It's the same thing with the reading. If they were on question 12 and we had to stop the session, the next time they get in, they will start with question 13. They won't be able to change their answers for the other ones.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to close this. It's just the easiest way I know how to get back into that test administration interface. So active sessions are one thing. Then we also have the ability to create an upcoming session. And so what this is I'm allowed to schedule a session that's up to 2 weeks long. And really what I do is I choose my session sort of time frame. And then I'm able to use the same test session ID number for that particular time frame. The biggest thing that I see with folks when they are doing an upcoming session is, if I start and I said that this was the 23rd, and I say I'm going to go through the 30th, I'm giving myself a week, and I click next and I choose which modular I want, what will happen is this will show up in the section here that says upcoming sessions. And then as soon as the 23rd comes up, so for tomorrow, it would then move to my active sessions. The biggest mistake that teachers make when they create that window and that comes into their active sessions is they think that that session is active, but what will end up happening is they will have to join that session, and then they're able to approve students that are in there. So I'll show you what that means. So if I schedule a session, here, and I'm going to put today, and then I'll say today to tomorrow. and I click next, and I'm going to choose a math modular for 5th grade. And I'm going to say, I would like this one here. I name it so that I know which one I'm going to. And I just end up saying, basically, I might say grade 5, numbers and operations base 10, and I'll say this is modular C. Again, test reason, we want to keep it the same as all of our colleagues, and I click Save Session. Here's the information with my session ID. If I had said tomorrow through, again, a week, it would be showing up here, but since I said it was the 22nd, it's showing up here. That link that kind of showed up like this, if students logged in and I gave them this right now, it will say no sessions available. And that's because I have not actually joined the session. I have to join it. And then I get this and I can start approving students as soon as they get in. It's the same code as what that copy link was. But some people like this because it's the same session ID each time. So it's really preference for how you would like to set up your test sessions. The last way to administer an assessment is as an at-home assignment. When you create an at-home assignment, that does not mean that the students need to be at home. They can be sitting right in front of you. The difference is this particular session you can have open for a certain amount of time, and you do not need to approve students to be able to do it. You basically send them a link. You could put it in your Google Classroom if you felt like it was something that you wanted them to just be able to click on the link. They would put in their first name and they would put in their SSID, and it would bring them directly into this. And then you could stop the session or close it if you didn't want them working on it at home or what have you. So this again can be up to a 2-week time frame. So if I go in here and I say create an assignment, I've got a 2-week time frame. I'm just going to maybe say I want it from today, and I'll open it for a day. I just want students in my class to be able to do this while I'm working with them. Maybe I'm working on science. Again, the science is called an interim, but if I'm looking at grade, maybe I'm a 4th grade teacher and I'm looking at earth space science here. My session name is, grade 4 or space science. I might even put in, you can't put in a dash, just so you know. So maybe this is earth space science 1. Save assignment. And here's the link that you can give to students, and then it will be easy for them to log in. It will automatically put this in for them. This particular session is open all of the time. It is, you don't approve students or anything. They can get right in. You can walk around the classroom. They could be doing it, if you were not doing this as a high stakes test, they could be doing this at home as a homework assignment. And then as soon as you want students to be done with it, you can just delete that particular session and it stops them from being able to get in. So those are the 3 different ways that you can administer the assessments. All right. Any questions on test administration there?
Pesky, remember to unmute. Yes, we just had one on the summative assessment is adaptive, but the modulars are not. So that helps to make them a good formative assessment because every student will get the same question.
Right, exactly. Okay. Next is, I want to talk a little bit about the reporting. I cannot bring you into the reporting portal because it's specific site data. So I'm going to give you some screenshots here. And then if you have any questions, let us know. So once the students are done with the modular assessments, the results are available. It doesn't usually take very long for them to be in the reporting portal. If for some reason you do not see the results in the reporting portal, it has to do with your permissions and whether or not your students are rostered to you as a teacher. So anytime we find that teachers aren't able to see student test results, most often it has to do with the fact that those students aren't rostered to them, so they don't have access to see that student data. Once you're rostered and you're able to see student data, you're going to have that report that's detailed down to that question level and specific standard level. And obviously the data can be used to assess understanding, create groups for teaching, really making sure also that you are digging deeper into those standards to help students master what they need to be able to show their understanding. To get into the reporting portal, it's the exact same way you get into all of the other test administration areas. And that is, you're on this homepage, you click test administration, scroll all the way down to the bottom. Right now, just a heads up, the reporting portal is not up and going. They're doing some uploads of students into Tide and everything. So it says coming soon, but it will look like this once you are able to get in there. So you click right on reporting. You'll get this choose your dashboard. I have right here selected that I would like to see the specific modular assessments for ELA and math. And then you just click go to dashboard and it will bring up something that looks like this. This is a little bit different than maybe what you saw last year in the system. On the right-hand side here, a lot of options that used to be up at the top of the screen are now shown on this main screen. So if you wanted to change your reporting time period, and look right here, I'm looking at last year instead of this year. If you wanted to print anything or if you wanted to download student results, you could do it from here. But if you just wanted to look at the assessment information, you would click on either one of these areas, whether you're looking at ELA or math, and then you would be able to pull up a specific report. So this is a specific report that's a student level report. I've got all the student names cut off of it, but you can kind of see what you're going to be looking at. So you'll get your total for how the students scored on this particular assessment. There are 3 levels of scoring. There is low, approaching, or on or above. Then if there's 10 or more questions on your assessment, there's a couple of math assessments that might be 8 questions, so you won't get this, but for the most part, if there's 10 or more questions, you'll get 5 items that the students did the best on and 5 items that the students did the worst on, and then you'll get your total items here. Anything that's on here in this area is hyperlinked. So you could click on this and it would bring up the exact question, right? You can see the answer. You can look at individual student questions. It will bring up the question and how the student answered it. So you're able to do that. You're also able to download or print the results. And so this is what it looks like in Excel. Again, student information is taken off, but you can see that all of the columns are represented in Excel, and you can format it the way that you would like to be able to present the data or look at the data in whatever way that you would like. Questions about that?
Yeah, just one question, which was a good question. Wanting to know if accommodations could be set up on the modulars.
Yes. Any accommodation?
Yes, and that's the answer I got. In Tide, whatever accommodations and tools that are set for the student will be available in the test modulars and interims and summatives.
Yes, perfect. All right. So just quickly, we've just got a couple minutes left. We wanted to show you and point you in the direction of some of the New Hampshire Sas resources that are on that Cambium website. Again, we're in this area here, the main page, and you're going to click on resources. There's a few different ways that you can scroll. You can click on resources here, or there's also on the bottom of every page, there's this little resource button that you could also alternately go into the resources there. Once you're on the resources page, you're able to search either by entering in your search criteria or refining your search criteria on the left-hand side here. You can also in this area select one of these areas and then search with that. So here are a couple of the really important materials that we find are helpful with the modular assessments and just in general on that portal. There are performance level descriptors for every grade level. So what these are these are rubrics that are matched up with all of the standards, and it tells you what the students are doing at a level 1, level 2, a level 3, or a level 4. So here's an example of 3rd grade math. Here is the standard, and here's what students are doing at each level of proficiency here. Here's an ELA example for grade 4. Again, your standards are on the left and your proficiencies and what they're doing at each proficiency level is across here. We've put these in the materials. They're already uploaded so that when you get the access to the Google Drive tomorrow, you'll be able to download all of these if you would like. Also, vocabulary lists for both math and ELA at every grade level. There is a vocabulary list. This has to do with, for ELA and math, there is all the vocabulary that you might see on the New Hampshire SAS assessments for each grade level. They're game changers, to be honest with you. If you do nothing else, at least look at these vocabulary lists, because some of these particular words we just don't necessarily get to in our everyday instructions, so they're super helpful. So here's the ELA vocabulary list as well. Thank you, Annie, for the math one. She did that one for us last year. And then also you can download, if you type in writing rubrics, again, we've already downloaded them for you, so you can get them in your handouts for tomorrow. But looking at the writing rubrics and seeing what the expectations are for students when they're writing is really helpful. I don't recommend necessarily getting rid of your current writing rubrics, but take a look at these and see if there's anything in here that you might incorporate into your own rubrics or just into your instruction. The last couple of things are these item type tutorials. So these are tutorials that really help students practice with some of the tools on the portal. So if you look at the students and families, you look at the item type tutorials, there's different tutorials that they can use for how do we look at grid items? How do we look at evidence-based selected response? There's a lot of different materials and helpful things for students to be able to take a peek at and for you to take a peek at to be able to help them. The last thing I want to show you is the student practice site. This is a lot of times when people have their students before the summatives, they take this practice test. This is where you find it. So you're able to just click on that practice site and choose a particular grade level, and a student can do the practice test. Any questions?
I have no more questions at this time.
Okay. We're just a couple minutes behind, so I just want to wrap up. Please make sure you pass questions along as we're wrapping up here. We've got some upcoming webinars that are for different grade levels for the modular assessments. If you have colleagues that are at other grade levels, definitely pass the information along. If you found this particular webinar helpful and you also work with other grade levels, just so you know, this next one coming up that's grades 6 through 8 math, the shell of that webinar is going to be very, very similar to what you're seeing today, but what you will do is you'll be getting access to the resources that are grades 6 through 8 math. So if you don't want to necessarily come to that webinar, but you would like those resources, definitely reach out and we can get you those resources without having you have to be at the webinar and things like that. Again, we really would like your feedback. As you are logging off today, a quick survey will pop up. We'd love to hear your feedback and what your thought about this webinar today. And then if you need to contact us, again, I'm Heather Jenkins, and we have Annie Wallace. She's your math person. In subsequent webinars, we will also have Kate's information on here as she is just getting started with the ELA aspect of our of help. So I'll just wait another minute or so. If you have any questions, we'll stay on. But other than that, thank you so much for coming.